Number 973 begins with a flashback to the Belfry months before recruitment started. Tim's actually okay with Carlo joining, since it's a flimsy pretext to show off the use of excess psychoactive clay they've gathered over the years for the soon-to-be-built mudroom, which, remember, works through science magic. Tim has recently felt less like himself the further he got from Gotham, and thought about hanging up the cape, find another way to help people, because he didn't fit in anywhere, but building the Belfry has changed all that.
This feels like a departure of his applying to college thing. If he felt less like himself away from Gotham, why go somewhere away from Gotham? Being a nerd surrounded by nerds is not a guarantee of inclusion. Did we really need a reminder of what the Belfry meant to him, or maudlin self-pity? Why couldn't this scene just have been about setting up the mudroom as it pertained to Basil?
I'll give the scene this much: it does have a moment that feels much less self-gratifying and over-dramatized compared to just about everything else in this run. Though it feels like they could have tweaked it a bit and found a way to use this copy of Clayface on their team instead of the genuine Article, who is presently rampaging through Gotham for already agitated protesters to see, like Firsties wanted. Orphan and Spoiler Alert have arrived after the tower's destroyed, seeing Tim having taken some debris to the head. Batman wants Batwing to rally his suits to join Pointy Ears in guiding Basil to Monster Town, where Steph, Tim, and Cassino will head to help Dr. October. Doctober? When Basil finally encounters some protesters, the Batmobile calls his attention away from them. Meanwhile, Anarchy's beginning to suspect that the whole unleash a crazed monster on the city plan isn't totally in line with the vision he thought he shared with the Syndicate. And first Vic's response?
Batman, put the weapon in my hand. I'm merely pulling the trigger.
It looks like the two are going to fight despite one's force field, so naturally, we cut away.
So, the first victim is just a liar. What started out as a villain that could have had a valid point or represented an unintended consequence of Batman's crusade doesn't even live up to what the Syndicate previously said they wanted, to fight for those who get caught in the crossfire.
When supporters of Batman were attacked, the 2 times that happened, that at least made sense for the character and their alleged motivation. But now people who paint their faces to resemble this 90s high school notebook sketch are just sacrificed as cannon fodder, with no lead-up to what appears to be a drastic change in tactics and motives. Even though Carlo tearing up the streets, just like the monsters that allegedly stirred Firsties into action initially, would have been seen by Gotham anyway.
Lazy. Clumsy.
There is a consolation here, a silver lining. The first victim wasn't all that compelling to begin with. Any potential the character had was already being wasted, so...
Nothing of value was lost.
Batwing's suits provide Bats with the backup he wanted, coordinated by Azrael and his suit's AI, while October contacts Pointy Ears. The cure is ready, about to be delivered by Cassino, but Clayface has gotten so large, his mask can't be contained in human form. He'll revert to Basil momentarily, and they'll just have to hope that his mind can maintain control when he goes giant again. The suits are taken out, leaving Bruce on his own, while Lonnie approaches Steph in a concussed Red R bearing a gift. The first victim.
Does Tinian have someone ghostwrite the fight scenes we actually see? That might explain some decent-looking brawls in between his habit of set up a fight, then skip it entirely. Maybe he just doesn't know how characters would win a fight. Just because there's a possibility that Lonnie could win because he built the first Vic suit doesn't mean we should have to yet again assume how things went down.
So lazy.
Steph hugs him because that makes so much sense, and he gives up a flash drive that could help Bats identify Firsties for rehabilitation. In the meantime, he's gonna peace out for a while. The ground shakes as Clayface gets nearer, and Batwoman isn't confident in the plan, especially since the towers used in the Night of the Monster Men that disabled the monstrosities have conveniently not been reconfigured. I thought they were super efficient and crime was down. Why didn't anyone take care of that, if only to kill some extra time? Anyway, she mentions the weapon from her dad to fire when Carlo reverts to human form, but Batman strictly forbids it as he nearly drives into Basil's mouth and gets tossed into the air. How'd that sneak up on him? Orphan arrives on the scene, injecting the cure right into Clayface's giant head, quickly reverting him to human form. He sees the destruction he caused, thinks of the casualties, and realizes he'll never get a happy ending. Cassino tries the "we're the same" shtick, but the actor says they're not. Which is true. And how much better she is. Not as true. Maybe if we were talking about Cassandra Cain and not this. She tearfully begins reciting Shakespeare, since it makes her speak like most people because reasons, when Carlo begins changing again. Kate radios Orphan to close her eyes, and the issue ends with a shot hitting Basil right through the head. A bit graphic, but that's just fine. It's clay instead of blood. 974, where Batman's gonna need a bigger wet dry vac, begins with the only reason Cassino and Basil were artificially made friends in the first place, so that his death would make her cry even more. Sure, Tinian was doing that already, but this was more drawn out, which I guess he thinks makes it an emotional narrative.
That was sappy, manipulative drivel.
Well, maybe that's too cynical. I should remember that their friendship was based on a solid foundation of them looking sad in the same room together once, then becoming besties because Shakespeare magic.
Red Robin, spoiler alert, and Dr. October arrive, the latter confirming the instantaneous chain reaction that resulted in Basil dissolving into lifeless clay, while kind of jumping between cold, matter-of-fact attitude and something more sympathetic, but not by much. This inconsistency seems especially odd considering that it seemed like the Doc was beginning to bond with Carlo as well. Tim knows who's responsible, and so does Bruce, breaking the gun over his knee and already getting in her face about it.
How could you, Kate? That club sandwich in the fridge was clearly labeled as mine. Oh yeah, and the killing Clayface thing. But it was my cheat day, and I dared to put extra ranch dressing on it. I have no cousin.
Tim and Steph arrive to chew her out as well, but she's standing her ground on saving Orphan and hundreds of others from Clayface when it seemed the cure wasn't working. Per the rules of engagement, like any cop or soldier, she picked the option that saved more lives. She'd do it again if given the opportunity, because there's not always time to find a better solution like Tim suggests. That's when Cassino appears from nowhere, clocking B-Woman and yelling that Basil could have been saved before ripping the bat emblem from Kate's suit. She didn't save Cassino's life, she was hurting it. I think melodrama itself just threw up in its mouth a little.
This symbol, special, means don't kill, means never kill.
Unless you're Red Hood, then it's okay, but still kind of a whole convoluted thing.
Also, the art here makes her look like a lot older than 15 years old. Not the first time this has happened, but anyway. Bats excuses Kate from active duty when Batwing and Azrael show up. Luke backs her decisions, and even though Jean-Paul tries to defuse things, Bruce is okay with them leaving too, if they want.
Fine, we'll go. We'll get a van, start a YouTube channel reviewing theme parks and tourist attractions, and solve wacky mysteries with a talking animal sidekick, like a marmoset. No, a raccoon. His catchphrase will be, "My mask doesn't come off," and we'll get picked up for a Netflix sitcom. We'll show you.
3 days later, Doctober is giving the cure to Mudface, per Carlo's wishes. No matter what, he wanted her to be Glory Griffin again. Word is that after her story went public, off-panel, she might even be released. However, thanks to her and the Syndicate, Monstertown destruction has doubled and hundreds are suffering, because Glory had such a notable hand in derailing Basil's progress. The Doc says that it was because of him that Griffin has this second chance, and she had best not squander it.
I'm not going to squander it. I've already signed a deal to get my own reality show on MTV. Wait a minute. What have I done?
Steph catches Tim outlining ideas for the next Belfry and scolds him about losing himself and how his spat with Batwoman and the path she sees him going down isn't part of his dream. She's decided to get out of town to figure things out, away from crime fighting and Tim. She loves and believes in him, but can't watch what he's becoming. Yeah, a few months of unseen dating brings so much weight to this moment. She leaves, and of course Tim breaks down crying as Bruce glides in. Try as he might to improve things, Drake feels he's destined to become the dark version of himself from the future, that every day it feels like Bat Tim was right. Batman is a curse he'll never escape.
Oh, shut up.
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
Batman exists. Bad things happen. Helping is difficult. I'm cursed. Wah! Maybe if there was some substance to any of these subplots, some effort or heart behind the emotions that are supposed to be there, this would elicit a reaction from me other than angered annoyance. I wasn't one of those people that got all teary-eyed at Toy Story 3, but even that had more of an effect on me than this drivel.
Jacob Kane visits his daughter with an offer to join him for the real mission, putting a new emblem on her ripped costume. Good thing he had that spare colony bumper sticker, I suppose. And no offense to Kate, but yeesh, is that a bad angle. Kind of makes her look like one of those stone-faced thugs Batman has punched in the animated series. The comic ends on everyone being obscured by Ulysses Armstrong in an undisclosed location. A version of Brother Eye confirms the timeline is advancing as planned, and the dork wants to speed up the journey to the dark future.
So much for all of it running back into Bat Tim's suit before returning to the future. So what, did some megabytes get lost over the Wi-Fi or something? Or distracted by a shiny object? Around the time of this story was the Detective Comics annual detailing Basil Karlo's new history, because a Tinian crafted origin has never been terrible, right?
I guess some points for the artists for making the cover look like a distressed monster movie poster, but as to the story itself...
Initiate flashback!
We flash back to when Basil's a very young kid, and his dad was an actor who mostly played movie monsters, using an industrial chemical called Renew in his work, but was drummed out of the business. This left him disillusioned and instilling in Basil the idea that there's a monster inside him, and he can never let it show, because nobody really loves a monster. Jump ahead a couple decades as his star rises, and he pals around with Glory Griffin, who describes a movie role he wants in the form of a really awkward question like she's a stumbling contestant on Jeopardy! Seriously, how do editors okay stuff like this? Basil wants the role to prove to his dad you can still be liked even when showing your darker self, and show the world the real Basil Karlo. However, after getting the part, which films in Gotham, he's driving his car when getting a call about his father's death, gets so distracted that he crashes and is disfigured as a result. And this is apparently after surgical grafts. Yeesh. He doesn't want people to see him like this, and his agent intends to take him off the movie's second skin, 'cause now he's so ugly.
If you're wondering what kind of person he was before, bland. He was very, very bland and unremarkable.
But after going to clear out his dad's place, he finds his stash of Renew, mixes it with wax and putty to remake his face to assure he's still on the film, and fires his agent and chases off Glory because only they can confirm his injuries. Well, also the EMTs, probably police, doctors, nurses, hospital cams, but anyway...
First of all, he's not a genius. He's an actor. And second, he's not much of an actor.
He soon worries he won't have enough of the goop to last through filming, and Daggett Chemicals ceased production of it because it caused serious injury to users. He starts posing as security in Daggett plants to steal hidden supplies, is eventually caught by Batman, and wakes up handcuffed to a hospital bed. Carlo's secret is exposed for all to see, and Veronica, director of Second Skin, pours salt on the wound. She picked him because his eyes and earnest reading made him perfect for a movie that was about how ugly things can be in places like Hollywood, and would have kept him in the film despite his disfigurement. But she somehow sensed he was different with his malleable face. Now that he's a crook, he's fired. Basil naturally blames a visiting Dark Knight, who tells him that the chemical he's been using destabilizes his brain and is causing his emotional outbursts. Smooth retcon, he said sarcastically. Roland Daggett isn't pressing charges, but has spent years illegally experimenting on the Renew that is now in legal custody. Once the actor is released from the hospital, he can do the right thing and tell his story to the district attorney, Harvey Dent. Instead, Carlo goes after the Renew chemicals being held for evidence. 2 police officers shoot at him, hoping to split a bounty Daggett has for the actor's death, dousing him in chemicals. He becomes Clayface and attacks the film set he was fired from, with pointy ears already there to evacuate everyone. Glory gets drenched in Renew because everyone's a monster inside, and instead of seeing this fight through, the story ends on a flashback of Kid Basil promising his dad to never let anyone see his inner monster as they watch an old horror movie, because the scripted reactions of actors totally hold meaning in the real world.
Ow, that hurt my brains.
Do yourself a favor. Instead of reading this, just watch the Batman animated series two-parter Feet of Clay. Not just because it's a much better story overall, but because Tinian's taking a lot from that series, and he doesn't do a good job with it.
The origin is atrociously derivative, the attempted theme of inner monsters is poorly done, and the emphasis was about Basil being a monster because his dad said it once. Uh-oh, I guess we gotta take the drunk's word for it. We never see or otherwise get any indication he did anything monstrous as a kid because we jump right to him as an adult. It's all painfully weak and makes an otherwise decent premise suffer. This doesn't make me any more sympathetic for Carlo when we don't really get to see him as a person. He's just some guy whose acting chops are as alleged as his inner demons, and he had a run of bad luck and took it out on others. I might give it points for mentioning what Renew does to the brain, but it just makes it feel like Batman's known what was happening to Clayface for years and did nothing about it and never brought it up. And as far as Basil's moral compass goes, it kind of conflicts with the whole idea that the chemicals made him do all this stuff and it wasn't his personal choice. It's all confused and poorly explained.
And that's gonna bring you great shame, I tell you what.
That's not on the Dark Knight. That's on the writer not thinking enough about what he's trying to do. Borderline plagiarism aside, or outright, depending on how you want to look at it, this could have worked better somehow incorporated into the main tech run, but again, it needs more emphasis on Basil as a person, not Tinian's chew toy.
If this was supposed to heighten the tragedy of his death, it failed masterfully. I'm actually siding with Kate Kane for squeezing that trigger. It was just so uninspired. As for Fall of the Batman, I didn't think it was very good. I'll let you recover from your surprised gasps.
Call it nitpicky if you want, but why does Steph enshrine her dad's suit? As we've seen in Bat Media, that's an act of denoting honor for someone. He tried killing her a couple of times. They spoke in a way suggesting hate for each other, with very little to contradict it. If she needs something of Arthur's to talk to, then a picture of them when she was a kid would work, or a news clipping of one of his heists. There's just no reason for this, but then again, spoiler alert's been kind of all over the place. Though mostly high and mighty and sanctimonious, even though she's screwed up and hardly seems remorseful. Then you have one of this writer's biggest weaknesses, relationships. Tim and Steph have only been dating for a few months, yet they talk as if it's been years. And no, I'm not going to headcanon their entire pre-Flashpoint courtship into this, just like I won't do it with their barely established friendship with Orphan, because that just feeds the laziness of Tinian and DC. We hardly see them in actual boyfriend-girlfriend mode, and a lot of the times she's finding an excuse to yell at or berate him over something. I have very little sympathy that Tim hid his plans to pass on college because Steph has been pretty emotionally abusive, and when that tactic doesn't make everything go her ambiguous and confused way, she leaves. Pre-Flashpoint Steph wasn't perfect, but this feels like a confused wreck. Spoiler alert says she wants to help, but her actions mostly show someone doing everything in her power to do the exact opposite.
But this story was really more about Clayface, crying. Anyway, setting aside how dull death in comics is in general, I couldn't really feel this because of its poor foundation.
Tinian suddenly decides that the clay form is making his moral compass deteriorate, but it really doesn't add up the more you think about it. Wasn't Clayface in that form all the time for years before Bats approached him? But it's only recently, for the purposes of joining the team, that he suddenly feels sad for his crimes. So, how does this work? And the excess clay, how is he losing so much of it but able to stay large outside of humanoid form? If all that excess can't be contained in his human body, are we saying he somehow regenerates it over time when he loses it? For all the alleged geniuses and attempts to be scientific in this run, it feels like physics only matters when the writer feels like it.
Not scientifically possible!
But to a more emotional point, everyone's ripping off masks and crying so much it has no impact, even in moments when it really should.
This guy doesn't write emotional narratives. He just thinks that if he writes enough people weeping into each story, it'll force the readers to get teary-eyed enough that all his shortcomings become obscured.
As I said earlier, his death is the only reason Tinian made him friends with Cassino, the ultimate excuse for her to cry, be sad, but that was always empty, like all the other times he's friended characters together. 2 moments alone where they were unhappy does not an established friendship make. It would be one thing if they actually communicated about something other than what was upsetting them, did more than one thing for recreation that somehow changed how she talked. Sweet mercy, that was so stupid, I just can't... Anyway, the lack of any real interpersonal link also means that Orphan's comparison of the two is even more of a false equivalence than it previously seemed. Seems like the writer isn't able to be very complex, can't build connections between people, so he just says the connections are there. That's why everything that's supposed to make this moment explosive just nosedives. None of this is really helped by the victim syndicate, who are just disappointing. Mute, Noxious, and Madame Crow do nothing. First Vic just betrays whatever goal the group was going for in the first place, I guess just to be the cackling villain. The plan was really just an idea relying on luck, only working because the writers said so. It relied on keeping Clayface from shapeshifting for more than half a day, while his teammates are conveniently doing something other than looking for him, never suspecting he's missing, even ever-concerned Orphan, and that he completely forgets all the training he's had to defend himself and escape. It's the writer's standby of, they have to be stupid for this to work. Mudface's betrayal was iffy for me. I barely accept the motive of staying mutated to hurt Basil, and I guess you could say his death changed her mind about the cure, off-panel naturally. But if he was secretly working with bats, why would Gotham think any different of him when the word got out?
What's that? Notorious supervillain Clayface is working with Batman? Well, that doesn't seem so bad. Sure, he's threatened the city, killed some people, but if he's trying to get his life together... What? A woman he hurt but could have cured has a sob story? This will not stand!
As for Batwoman taking him out, I don't know. Yes, she is a soldier, and I can understand her being more willing to kill should the situation call for it, but that's about all the sense made from this. No real build-up or her hinting she'd be willing to end a teammate, which you'd think she'd be a little begrudging over or penitent. Same goes for Batwing, and maybe Az, though he wasn't so much endorsing Kate's actions as he was trying to keep things from getting more heated. Their split is just kind of there, because otherwise how can the Batman fall or whatever if only Kate is grounded? Though, considering the only people we saw in danger were saved by Batman leading Giganto Clay away, are we certain that waiting a few seconds to see if he could control the form would have been out of the question? It's not like he needed to be in Basil mode for the weapon to work, and we don't see anyone hurt or killed in his rampage. Sure, it's said, but the mayor said that there were riots, and... Nope. Just loud, angry protesters, which aren't the same as rioters. Though the whole team is also pretty stupid for having completely forgotten that sonic device spoiler alert used and those contingency weapons Batman had in place at the Argus facility. You're telling me the Belfry didn't have anything like that? And Armstrong is still not interesting, even with a key to a possible dark future. Like previous works by Tinian, this story raises a lot of questions that, if anyone had bothered to ask, could have found answers and made this journey infinitely less painful and jumbled.
All that chaos because Firsties wanted Batman to know what it's like to be a victim. I don't know about Bruce, but I certainly feel like one after reading this. I'm the Angry Spork, and man have I got issues.